an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Immortal Great Souls Book 2, The Rascor Plains, chapters 22 through 26. In these chapters, Scorio is feeling himself a little bit in these chapters, and Jova is like, hey bud, kind of resting on those laurels a little bit, maybe you want to get up, and Scorio's like, I'm good, and then somebody else is like, are you? That's rough, Scorio. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. Dan is here in the chat trying to get the song Zippity Doo-Dah stuck in my head, you monster. Yeah, this section was really, really interesting, you guys. I am really fascinated at the psychology of the characters, and it's slow moving in terms of what we are learning about them, but not in a way that feels like I'm impatient about it. It's just the way that you learn about people over time with the different events that you run into and the circumstances in which you find yourself, or where you find you need help from a particular person that you otherwise might not fuck with. And the whole conversation between Scorio and Jova, really, I have a lot of thoughts on, and I'm excited to talk about, but I can't start there. So let's start with chapter 22. So the last chapter ended with the White Queen being like, I'm going to be getting ready to take off. I'm going to start packing, and shit does indeed really just begin instantly. Then Scorio is approached by Desiree, and she tells him, the people that you are in touch with from the rebellion, I want you to tell them they are to meet with the White Queen, and they have her personal assurance of their safety. All the things that they have done in the past, they're immune to. But she has this really intense energy to her, and when she walks away, Zala is just like, woof, Jesus, what is her deal? And Naomi says she's got a rare power. She can extrapolate the most optimum plan for any problem with very little information. And this is so... I'm getting ahead of myself even mentally, so I need to slow my brain down. But yeah, the idea of this kind of power is really, really interesting. And as somebody who likes to plan, that it would just, I would relish it. I would love it so much. So Jova tells Scorio, I think you've got this covered, which was the first moment that I kind of was like, is she not liking this? It was just the fact that she just didn't feel like she needed to come or cared enough to come. It was a moment of me really it wasn't like I was upset with her or anything, but it made me stop and consider what she had said about how all I want to do is keep my head down and work and get stronger. And evidently this doesn't feed into that for her. But obviously, coming from my perspective, I think that all of these things are kind of linked up, and that is part of the argument between her and Scorio later. So they head out, and Scorio has to go and meet with was it Dala? I always feel like I get her name wrong. Dola. And he tells her the good news. Now, this is when I start feeling a little on edge. Scorio is so He's proud of himself, and that's totally legitimate. That's valid. He's done a lot. He put himself through a lot. He has risked a great deal. But he is so. I feel like smug is too strong a word. I don't think that's fair, but I will say he's very pleased with himself. And again, I can understand this, but the problem that I am running into here, it's twofold. One, just meeting to talk. That is nothing. Like, and even the other things that she has put on the table, that is, as has been pointed out by Moira to Praximar, that is not actual material change. That is a restructuring of the same obfuscation that they had been using. They have just changed it up, and I'm not saying nothing will come of this conversation in person. And as Dola points out, if the White Queen wanted to kill the rebellion leaders, it would probably have been something she could take care of without this kind of silly plan. So that did make me feel better when Dola pointed that out. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit concerned. Because the fact that Nova had been about to bail on Bastion, I could see it being either she had been about to bail, and so she's like, yeah, sure, I'll institute a bunch of changes because I don't have to deal with it. I'm out. You know, it's like completely upending something on your second to last day of work. But also, it could just be, well, I was going to bail, so I can just promise whatever. And whether or not it actually happens or anybody follows up on it is my problem. And that there is a sense of like, I, in the first case, it's like, I'm going to do this thing, and the people who are in power are going to be pissed off, and I get to sort of chuckle to myself because now they have to cope with all of the shit I've thrown at the fan. In the second scenario, she is just handing the bag to somebody else and running. So they sound like a similar approach, but they both have like a different objective behind them. And one of them is to punch up and the other is to punch down. Alternatively, she doesn't mean any of this, and there's a whole other thing that she's going to try and pull when they meet. I just feel like in some ways this has felt too easy. And Scorio is pretty much putting that down to the fact that she had been about to shake things up on her own anyway by leaving. So even though I would ordinarily kind of be like, Scorio, don't you think this is too easy? I really feel that goes a long way toward explaining it for him in his mind. And so he just isn't as concerned about it, you know? And I understand that, and he might be right, but this sort of thing just doesn't usually get changed this easily. And considering what Praximar has been up to, it may be him that is doing something to put a jam on all of it, and it's not actually the White Queen at all. I'm really curious what Praximar has been up to, and whatever he's been up to, is it going to be something the White Queen finds out about before she leaves? Or is it going to be something that begins to slide into place after she has gone? So, and then the follow-up question is, if it happens before she leaves, will it be something she can trace back to Praximar? Is it something that will, be very clear the source of it? And is it clear in the sort of way where she knows but nobody else does? Is it clear in the sort of way where everybody can tell and she feels like she has to do something and really like take a stand because it's making an example of Praximar? Like every question about what could happen, it's just predicated on another question whether it's going to be handled a certain way, because obviously in this universe reputations are like paramount to people. So there's a lot of stuff that like we can know somebody is fucked up and did the shitty thing. But just because we know that doesn't mean we can hold them to account in the way we would like, because they may be protected by somebody, or they may have plausible deniability, or they may have some other like weapon in their back pocket they can use back against you. And so yeah, there's a lot. Just like I anticipate a bomb of some kind. And the fact that Scorio is as confident as he is, I understand the feeling that he is experiencing right now. The thing the thing is, it's he wound up being able to see the White Queen way ahead of schedule. So it wasn't even like a push in terms of time. And then she like immediately listens to him. So he's able to come back and like report back to folks. And he really feels like he kind of saved the day and pulled one out. All of this was his plan. And it has seemed to really work out. So I don't want to be as frustrated with him as I am. If I were in his shoes, I would be very, very proud of myself. I really would. I know that. It's just stepping back from it that I'm kind of like, oh God, it's just the calm before everything goes to shit. That's my assumption here. Um, Sorry, Dan is in the chat, says, that little itch that things are going too easy is only going to get worse. This is why I call this book stressful. Something isn't adding up and you just don't know who, what, when, where, or why, and that feeling just keeps getting worse. Oh boy. All right. So, oh right, I forgot that he runs into Kayla also. Kayla is the one that was at the academy and basically tattled to Praximar about Scorio and his involvement with the robbery on Chimera. Is that the house? I can't remember who it was he stole from. I think it was Chimera. Um, it's interesting because like they're talking to House Manticore. I think Chimera is the one that was originally in talks with Scorio. Hydra is the house that is affiliated with Praximar. There's Basilisk, and I can't remember what their deal is. Like, if we've met much of anyone from Basilisk. They haven't really played into things quite yet. The houses are sort of like, I like the way they're being handled, where they are relevant for sure, but they aren't the major play. Like, they aren't dominating the entire story. Um. Anyway, so let's see. So yeah, this is when he tells them, and when at first when he's like sharing the news that the White Queen is going to be leaving, they have the same reaction that everybody else did, but he manages to calm them down, and Dola comes up to him afterwards and is like, "Never thought I'd say this, but damn good work." So chapter 23. The White Queen is meeting with the council and hammering out particulars, and for the most part, Scorio hung about the citadel, waiting for good news and reassuring Dola and Abentha that all was in hand. The autocrators came and went with their entourages, their expressions stony, until at last the announcement was made. The Queen's accords had been ratified, the people of Bastion given almost all they had requested, and a new age had begun in Bastion. Elated, Scorio searched the crowds in the Citadel's great antechamber, trying to catch sight of a familiar face. And this is when Jova shows up. And she's like, "Are you done? I've been waiting over an hour." Uh, and she's like, "Dameon has been waiting for us. He arrived this morning and asked to meet with us almost immediately. He's been understanding of your awaiting word from the council, but you've kept him waiting for hours. Not a good look for your first meeting with the nominal head of Manticore." "Jova." Scorio stopped and pulled his arm free. "I've not been wasting my time." She stared flatly at him. "No, you've been indulging in your pet project that has no bearing on the reason we declined house sponsorship and made ourselves targets to half our class. That's no longer a problem, surely." "Have you heard of an official cancellation of Praximar's offer? No? Neither have I, this means that at any moment we might have to fight off students again." But I'm not surprised. Scorio, not everyone likes you or your obsession with reforming Bastion's laws. Are you saying that you don't? What I'm saying is that it's high time you shelved this obsession and started focusing on what truly matters: our advancement, learning the truth behind how everything works, and figuring out our next steps. She caught herself, closed her eyes, then sighed. Look, I'm not completely heartless. It's great what you've done for the people of Bastion. I'm sure I'd be more empathetic if I'd been forced to live as you did instead of being born directly into the academy. But my thoughts are all on the foes that await us in hell, both the obvious ones and the hidden. We can't spend our time on causes immaterial to our progression. The well-being of tens of thousands of innocents is not immaterial. Jova bit her lower lip as she reined in her temper. Let me put it this way. I signed up to work alongside you because I thought we were kindred souls. I admired your obsessive need to train and gain power, to let nothing stop you from maximizing your potential and accomplishing the impossible. But ever since we left the academy, that drive seems to have disappeared. She shook her head in confusion and dismay. Where is the Scorio who was willing to risk death to advance? Where is the Scorio who trained at all hours and sacrificed everything to prove everyone wrong? Scorio frowned at Jova. He's right here, and I still want all of that. But Jova, we won. I came first in the gauntlet. I not only got to tell Praximar to go to hell, but did so before the entire gathered Great Soul community in Bastion, and now I just got to do it again. We won? Her pity was scathing. Won what? A brief moment of applause? Scorio, we're still nothing. We can't even get close to scratching a Dreadblaze. Didn't our time on the plains teach you that? We're as helpless as chars out there, and we'll always be helpless till we reach Imperator, and even that's not a guarantee. One? Her pity became open derision. You sound like an idiot. Hey now. Scorio stepped in closer, his good humor finally slipping away. Just because you've been useless in our fights against Evelyn and Davalos doesn't mean you get to take your ire out on me. Useless? Your power was uniquely suited to make you a star in the academy, but out there, you're just a punching bag that keeps getting up. Whereas the Nightmare Lady and I consistently bring the fight to whomever we're up against. Does that mean I'm done training? Not by a long shot. But it does mean I'm not itching to prove myself like you are. A punching bag that keeps getting up. All right, that was harsh. I'm sorry. That was out of line. But no, maybe I'm not that Scorio any longer because I don't need to be. Victory does count for something. Jova, I defied the odds and I won. I came first in the gauntlet. I'm a Tombspark. Soon enough, I'll be Flame Vault all in less than 1 year. And to cap it all off, I just brought about major social change in the cradle of our kind, improving lives of literally tens of thousands of people. So yes, I think I'm doing all right. And it's not my problem if you don't. So much juicy stuff. I love these sorts of arguments where everybody is right. This is like the argument with the Nightmare Lady as well. It's just they both are making really valid points. And they are both being told some shit that they need to hear. And they both aren't ready for the conversation. And this is the stuff that makes you grow as a person. So it's like you'll look back at this and be like, they really read me for filth. Wow. I have had this in my life many times with somebody that would say something that I just get very pissy about. But the thing is, you can tell the difference if you are like starting to get to know yourself better. There are times where you flame up in reaction to something because somebody is so off base that it's almost laughable, you know? And it's like, that makes you angry that they are so wildly misjudging you. But then there are times where you flame up because they really hit on something that you already have been kind of trying to pretend isn't really happening. And that is the shit that you need a person in your life willing to call you on it. And it's very funny because, Scorio was talking about how this is the role of friends when it comes to Naomi, but it's easy to say that and look at you reacting to it, Scorio. So my opinion on it all is one, it is relevant to their growth in a way that Jova can't fully appreciate. And I think it's just because I am, as a reader, coming at this very much from like all of this is interconnected, and the fact that you guys are being lied to, I believe, on a grand scale about the function of the world means that you're being held back from advancing as quickly as you could advance if you knew the truth, and that the way these people are being exploited and oppressed is likely part of that whole thing, and that helping them ultimately will be helpful to you as well. But that is a very, very big picture thought process. And like I said, it is coming from the place of a reader who knows everything that's been going on with everybody. And Jova isn't seeing that. And I'm not even sure she believes that the picture is as big as that at this point. So her really like being zeroed in on their personal advancement and investigation of whatever it is that was in her like journals. I understand her feeling like we have completely lost the thread here. Second, though, the fact that she's saying like, Scorio, where is your drive all of a sudden? I think there's a couple things going on with that. I think one, he has had a run of really, really good luck. And honestly, that shit will go to your head. It's like, I'm not faulting him for that. This is something that I also experienced. And I talked about this a little bit with like how Jova reacted to like leaving the academy and being up against actual challengers for the first time, and how she has been taken off guard by the fact that she isn't the best out there anymore. And I had a similar like win streak hard in my junior year of high school, where I won a short story writing competition. I won a poetry competition. I won a visual art award, and all of these came with like cash prizes and articles in the newspaper. And I wound up getting like the lead in two musicals, and I was like top of my class in like for my GPA of the year. Like, it was just one of those years where I was fucking nailing it. Everything I did was like gold. And I really began to buy my own hype. And the thing is, everybody around you telling you like how amazing you are, how do you not start to believe it? Right? You need some kind of influence to puncture that as the inflation begins. And that's Jova. And he should be grateful for her, actually. She's doing him a service. And like, there are times where there's different ways to do this. Like, Jova is like, she's not saying you're not shit, Scorio. She is simply saying you're acting like you can just like, just kind of wipe your hands off and say, oh, I'm all done. And that's hilarious and childish and immature and get real. When I was like on this win streak, I had a couple of friends that I had my short story that had won a competition. There was a second round. So the first win, I got $2,000, and the second win would get me three. And I asked my friends during class to like say a prayer for me to get it. And I was sitting with my two friends, and one of them said, "No, I'm not going to pray for you. I think you've won enough." And my other friend was like, "Yeah." And I was heartbroken. Like, And I still to this day think about that moment because it's one thing to be like, you need to be like a little bit grounded about yourself. And then it's another thing for your friends to just be like, I resent you. And that was what that felt like. And I think it sort of made me like self conscious about being successful publicly in any way from then on because I really felt like those were my two closest friends and they said this to my face like around people that could hear them, you know? So I think there's like two different ways to try and puncture the expanding ego, and one of them is more productive than the other. And I think what Jova is saying is genuinely productive. She also, I think the lack of his drive may be coming from the fact that he has lost a lot of his anger. And what was driving him for so long was proving everybody wrong that fucked him over, threw him in a pit to die, and forgot about him. And yeah, that will be a motivator. And y'all, I have had to like really be on some self-reflection shit lately because I'm trying to get back into weightlifting and it has really become startling to me realizing how much of my like overall success with steady lifting in the past has depended on going to the gym where people will see me, a fat woman, doing heavy lifts successfully and how much it was just me wanting to give the finger to people. And now that I'm trying to pursue that kind of lifting at home where nobody is watching, the drive isn't there. It's sobering to realize about myself that I am motivated 90% by spite and anger when I go to the gym, by this like rage about the way that fat people are perceived and treated in any space, but especially in fitness spaces. So that has been something I've had to really figure out. How am I going to cope with this? How do I reckon with that? And I think that might be the deal with Scorio is like he has reached a place where everybody is telling him instead of what they used to, you're worthless, you fucked up and you're a bad person, you did shitty things in your past. Doesn't matter that you don't remember them. You're garbage. Now it's the opposite. Everybody is just gassing him up all the time. And I think that's sort of taken the wind out of his sails weirdly. So as much as I feel for him in the next scenes where he gets a little bit of a slap down, I think it's just exactly what he needs. And I suppose we'll see. I will say as she walks away, he says to himself, "Damn it, way to go, Scorio." So I feel like he knows he really did not handle that well. She was being reasonable about the way she was talking to him, and he had to go for, you have been useless in fights and you're a punching bag that keeps getting up. There was no call for that, dude. You took it to another place, and that was not cool. And you should feel bad. That you've got her fucked up if you think that you can just say that shit and then still be buds. Like, you're gonna have to do a lot to repair that, I feel. It's like I almost feel like it's going to be even harder than it was with Naomi because Naomi doesn't have anybody else. So she also had like a loneliness that spurred her on to want to reconnect with Scorio more. But Jova's got two close friends and she's mostly only had those two friends and preferred it that way. So I feel like Jova's gonna be fine if things don't get patched up. He's the one who needs her, really. And you better fucking remember that, my guy. Um, so the next chapter is when they meet up in the abandoned church. And there was a man here. There's like on the way in, there are all of these mosaics about the depths of hell A man radiating beams of gold defied a wall of crimson tentacles, his expression serene. There, two children walked hand in hand through a forest of surreal blue polyps that seemed to curve about them, forming a tunnel. On the far wall, a host of fiery creatures bent knee to the serene man who looked older, his face haggard and gray-bearded. Interesting. I'm wondering if this is the person Praximar was like, why haven't you come back, my guy? Or what? But, so this is when he meets Dameon. Super handsome, blonde, carefully coiffed blonde hair, and, the stubble, tall, broad shouldered. I'm trying to, like, fan cast him in my head. And I think it's just because I have been watching The Mentalist, but I keep picturing, I think his name is Simon Baker that plays Patrick Jane. And I don't think he is appropriate, really. But it's just that he has a real talent for what it is that Dameon is good at. It's interesting because you guys, when we first met Davalos, I really felt a way about him. And I still feel a way about him. But I also can't help but think to myself that sometimes people aren't super friendly and don't get hugely invested in other folks instantly. That doesn't make them bad people. It's just that he isn't as friendly as what I, was hoping. Dameon is as friendly as I was hoping. And it's possible he is much more false than Davalos is. So I'm just trying to like keep in mind that, the impressions that you get of people, it's not that they're, not accurate necessarily, but you have to take into account that just because somebody seems nice, that doesn't really necessarily speak to like the quality of their internal value system and integrity. That said, okay, see, Dan says he has the right personality fit for Dameon, though. See, that's how I felt. Like, if you haven't watched The Mentalist, guys, um, that show Psych was kind of a ripoff of it, but it's basically he was a fake psychic, and he started talking about a serial killer on the air, like he was psychically connected to the guy. And the serial killer was like, the fuck you are, and goes out and murders this man's wife and daughter. And that's before the show begins. So when the show starts, he is obsessed with finding the killer and has started working with the California Bureau of Investigation as a consultant because he is a fake psychic, but that is all based on real skills in cold reading. And so his observational skills and his memory are so excellent that it's giving Sherlock very much. Um, but Sherlock is played much more as like he is mostly insufferable and you keep him around because he does the job, but he's an asshole. And Patrick Jane in the show, he is also insufferable at times, but then he'll flip it and be incredibly charming and really funny, or he'll be an asshole to somebody that you are like, yeah, get him. And so you can't help but kind of like root for him, even though you recognize that if you knew him in person, you'd probably want to strangle him. And because he is so good at reading people, he is really good at like giving people boosts of confidence because he zeroes in on exactly what they're self-conscious about and makes them feel like they are that exact thing is actually their strength, really. And that's sort of what I feel like Dameon does with Lianchi, because what they do is they play this game and they each have to pick teams like it's dodgeball, and Lianchi is the last one picked. And later on, Davalos tries to say like, oh, I had you picked last to make to like undercut your importance, but you're going to be absolutely key for us. And I really call bullshit. I think he did what he needed to do to keep her buoyed so that she would perform well when it came time, and that he was like very aware of all of what was happening in her head after being picked last, and knew sometimes if you feel down on yourself, your performance is going to reflect that. And that can have a huge effect on how much you push yourself because you believe that you're not as good anyway, so why bother? I can very much be like that. I do not respond well to like negative reinforcement. And so there are some people who do, being told like you're shit. I mean, like I said earlier, I can be motivated by spite, but it's spite against people that I don't like, trust, or care about is different than being told you're garbage by somebody teaching you or who is in charge and knows their shit. And that feels very, very different. Um, so anyway, Dameon is just really like, oh, it's Scorio, this guy, like just doing the thing where he's saying all the shit that Scorio just said to Jova to defend himself. But Scorio, after that fight, is kind of feeling like embarrassed at the way this dude is talking, and just sort of, yeah, 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 sure, I couldn't have been here without my friends, yada yada. Um, so they split up into teams, and I am going to kind of jump past a lot of this, but the goal is to grab, each of them has like one side of the court, and they have to grab the brick of the opposite team and take it all the way back to their own side. And they make a plan on how this is all going to be handled, but as is so often the way, the plan is the plan for like the first 5 minutes, and then shit doesn't go to plan. And one of the big reasons that shit doesn't go to plan is that Simeon doesn't play the role Dameon had predicted. Simeon winds up going after uh, Leonis to take his body over, which I will tell you what, his power is so, so scary. I really like the fact that Simeon seems a little self-conscious about his ability. There's a part of me that almost wonders if there isn't more to it, because he says, when Davalos says like, oh, he can like take your body over, Simeon gets a little defensive and is like, it's not that simple. And I'm wondering, like, considering how sensitive Simeon seems to be, is that a product of his ability? Does taking people's bodies over give him some sort of insight into the way their mind works and their internal monologue or something that causes him to have a lot more empathy in general and to just be more sensitive? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just something about, I won't say that he's like apologetic about his power, because that's not really it, but it's clear that he didn't like Davalos framing it the way he did, and that he feels there's something else happening than, you know. I also do want to address that for me, and this is not like, I think probably part of it is listening on the audiobook, but we've got Dameon, Simeon, and Davalos. And I kept getting Dameon and Davalos mixed up and Dameon and Simeon mixed up in the midst of the fight. So I listened to this twice and I was able to like get it a lot better on the second time. But it definitely, their names are each just similar enough to the others that I started going, wait, which one is this guy? So let's see. I'm trying to find the spot where he takes over Leonis. Here it is. Oh, bless him. I felt so bad for him. When Leonis, like, when he gets taken over, he starts to go after Scorio instantly. And Scorio attempts to use his like aura to get him to back off, which apparently doesn't work. And it says like, Scorio hit Leonis with the Tomb Spark Aura, willing the man to just back the hell off, but Leonis laughed, shielded by Simeon's superior power, and came after him. And I was really interested because, like, the fact that he laughed, that's part of the thing that makes me feel like Simeon might take his body over, but it felt like Leonis's personality was still there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't, I may be wrong, but I just didn't really get the feeling from Simeon's personality that he is the type to laugh in battle. You know, to like be like, "Ha, you tried it." You know, that has a kind of energy to it. And I may be wrong, especially because this is like a kind of a friendly fight, you know? So maybe he would. But there was just something about that really felt particularly like Leonis, except Leonis isn't in control here. So what does that mean? Um so this is when Juniper comes after him, and he at this point when he backs off, Jova is diving at him coming from another direction. And it says he grabbed her hold of her by the waist as he fell and arched his back, wrenching her up and around to slam her as hard as he could into the flagstones. He knew she could take it. And I want to believe you that that's what's happening, that this is your respect for her as a fighter. But I can't help, Scorio, but feel like maybe you're still mad, and that's really what this is. Like, eh, I don't know. I don't know. I do love though that as he is holding on to her, she starts her like fear power and he just yells hell no and like backs away from her. That is so funny to me. Like, even though he knows what it is and should be kind of prepared, he can't control the fact that he just instantly rejects it. Um so let's see. Scorio falls down. Oh right, yeah. Juniper has these like golden flashes that are really fucking with him. Um and let's see, Juniper's golden flares rocketing up with his line of sight. He hit Jova with the overwhelming command to drop to the ground. He heard her curse as she fell to her stomach, even as her body resumed boiling forth in disgusting tumors and moist, fleshy expanses. Blech. Um, so Simeon comes up behind Damon and he takes Damon over. Dameon, sorry. Now, I want to mention that by the time this is over, the opposite team wins. Simeon is the clincher. It seems like Leonis is kind of in a fugue state and has to be brought out of it with like a potion. I'm unsure. I'm assuming that it's like it didn't have that effect on Dameon because he is what is his I think he's not Flame Vault. He's one higher than that. But like the effect on Leonis, I'm assuming, is much more intense because he is so much lower in ranking. Um, but that side effect I wasn't expecting, and that really like is kind of creepy to me. That you'll take their body over, and then when you're done, they're just sort of inert for a while until you're able to like get them back out of it again. Yikes. That's a really intense power. Like, everybody has got some scary ones for sure, but there's something about this that's like completely robbing you of agency in a way that is particularly upsetting. Um, let's see. I never want to hear the phrase moist, fleshy expanses ever again, says Dan. Amen. Dreadblaze. Thank you. That's the one. Also, this is the point when Lianchi uses her power, and Davalos has never seen her power in action before. So I was sort of expecting this to be more of a moment. The fact that she had been away when everyone else fought Dameon or Davalos, see, I'm doing it already. That when he ran into her and like got to see what she could do, that there'd be more to the moment. But I guess the fact that she just literally like kicks him in the balls is a pretty good moment. I can't help but LOL at that. And this is the point where Scorio almost manages to save the day. Dameon, being possessed by Simeon, has to get by him. And Scorio is after him, and then his heart gutters and dies. So afterward, Dameon does his thing where he hypes everybody up. Great job, all of you. And he goes one by one to each person and tells them a thing that they did well. He's an excellent manager. This is a guy you want in charge. Like, you need to handle people. Everybody is going to respond to feeling individually seen. So I fully approve of this, but there is a part of me that's like, because he's so good at it, I'm almost all the more suspicious, which is just the way that works. But then eventually he has to pull Scorio aside. And he's like, your heart is a real problem. If you had been able to like see it through, you could have changed the whole way that went. But the fact that your heart died, plus I can see that your body isn't integrating mana the way it's supposed to. This is like gonna be a major problem for you. And frankly, I want to take you on board, but I am concerned that you're actually going to be a weak link. Because if things were different and you were absorbing the mana well, you'd be a lot more durable even in your human form. You wouldn't need to change over in order to be so invincible to certain types of harm. But you do. You have to switch over, which forces you into using your heart, which forces it all to go all that much faster. And he says, I understand and respect the sacrifices you had to make to get this far, but I will not allow Manticore to suffer for your weaknesses. If you want to be a full member of our outfit like your friends, you're going to have to work twice as hard so as to earn the elixirs necessary to heal your heart. Not a problem. I can do it. I bet you can. This is a fair warning. However, whatever I ask the others to do, you'll have to do double. Given the state of your heart, it's going to take a lot of wealth and a lot of resources to get you up to speed. You'll have to convince me every inch of the way that it's worth it. Like I said, not a problem. We'll see. If anybody can overcome the colossal setback you've taken upon yourself, I'm sure it's Scorio, savior of Bastion and man of the people. And when he looks over at Jova, she is just a little smug. She's not like, not an overt expression, but there's just a little like, mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, he did sort of know all this already and seemed to kind of forget about it in light of the way that everybody was treating him. And I'm glad he's being reminded of it. And, there was a part of me that sort of thought maybe Manticore would just be like, oh, we'll be able to give you everything you need. But Manticore isn't as big a house, like Chimera. They were willing to give him what he needed, but also put him through a pretty rigorous test beforehand to determine the same thing ultimately. Is it worth pouring all of these resources into this person? So while a part of me felt rather upset at the way that Dameon was outlining this, he's really quite fair about it. There's nothing unreasonable. I also have to mention there's this line that I really liked. Dameon's expression was hard as granite, and the contrast with his amiable nature thus far was striking. And that's the thing that I really both like and am suspicious of. That he can be Mr. Jocular, everybody's great, look how great you did there, girl, yes, go. And then he turns around and he can be like, all right, what the fuck? What are we going to do about this? Being able to do both of those things, awesome. You need both. If you're going to be a good manager, you have to be able to both hype people up and be convincing when it comes to like plans of action, discipline, whatever. But Also, if you're able to do both, that does mean that you might be a more convincing liar or role player if you're, kind of not up to what you say you're up to. So I really like Dameon so far, but I also kind of have my eye on him. So, okay, chapter 26. Um, After sitting around in the capacious entry halls for 3 light cycles of the sun wire, they rose along with hundreds of others to watch the autocrators emerge from their inner sanctum. Looks like there was no resolution, said Damien, smoothing his coiffure back. What a waste of time. I'm going to speak with several contacts and make sure we're not missing out on potential business opportunities. Have fun, darling, said Evelyn. I've heard some old friends are hosting a get-together on the 3rd floor of the Kraken headquarters. We're all invited. Could be fun. And he advises all of them to go because if they're seen as a group, like the other great souls are going to understand that Manticore already has their hooks in this group. And they head out there and he gets stopped. Scorio gets stopped by Captain Thorn. Now, Captain Thorn is the one that him and Leonis went up to, who was like guarding the ship with all the gold mana, right? It took me a minute because I remembered his first name better because he said his name was Braun, and that really lodged in my head because of Braun from Song of Ice and Fire. So when he greets him as Captain Thorn, I had a moment of like, who? And then once he starts talking and explaining, I was like, oh, I think it's this guy, but I didn't get it right away. Um, but yeah, basically, Captain Thorn is here like representing the Iron Tyrant who has heard about Scorio and is interested in taking him onto his team. And he kind of, it's not like he's overtly saying, that Manticore ain't shit, right? But he has a sort of tone when he says, like, be careful the friends you make, or the way that he looks over at the members of Manticore. And it's difficult to know what the deal is here because I don't know either group well enough to guess what this is stemming from. My best guess with the information that I have at the moment is that the Iron Tyrant is establishment, and that probably if there is a giant lie being told, the Iron Tyrant is a part of it. And that if Manticore is a group that is pushing to like find out the truth about things, then it would stand to reason the group that is much more about doing what is expected according to current society wouldn't look super kindly on a group that is attempting to overturn some of that. It may be that simple. There may be a whole other thing. It may be like personal. I don't know. But yeah, he says like basically he wants you to work for him, and it's a huge honor what he has in mind for what your trajectory could be. But Scorio is like, well, is this offer also being extended to my friends? And he says, no, I'm afraid not. Like, you're the one who's made a name for yourself, and we don't know who they are. And Scorio is really gracious in turning it down, and it's just like, I really appreciate the honor of this, but I am here in the first place because of my friends. I can't just leave them behind. And Thorn says that only makes you all the more admirable. There are precious few in this hell of ours that won't sell loyalty in exchange for a chance at power. Hold tight to your principles, lad. They'll get you farther than any elixir. And I really liked that. I like that he has this experience with Thorn, and that he also had the experience with one of the heads of Chimera because he told them the truth about how he had stolen from them. So these are two people that are sort of like key figures in different outfits that seem to be impressed with the fact that Scorio is trying to be honest at the expense of his own advancement. And I'm hoping that this is something that's going to work out for him. That all of this, it may just pay off because this is a good way to be in general, or these particular characters may circle back around and wind up doing him a favor because they know that he is a decent guy. Um, so yeah, this is when he says, be sure to pick your future friends wisely. Um, Evelyn comes up and is just like, was he trying to snatch you away? And Scorio's like, actually, he kind of was. Simeon says, you're not missing out on much. The Iron Tyrant earned his moniker for a reason. You'd be entering a life of strict rules and impossible expectations. From what I've learned of you, that's not quite your style. Isn't it? Maybe not the strict rules. Impossible expectations? That feels exactly his style, I think. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But it may be that Simeon means that in a slightly different way. I don't know. So Scorio is wandering around this party, looks over at Jova, who is keeping to herself and her friends. Um, and Naomi just comes and sits with him and sort of looks at him, but she doesn't engage in conversation, and it's just a comfort that she's like hanging out with him. And I did really like this, the two of them just being but not needing to talk, um so let's see, this is when Evelyn is going up to this balcony. Evelyn dove into the crowd with an exclamation of joy. Simeon tapped Leonis on the shoulder and pointed at an expansive counter where crystal decanters and racks of test tubes were set up. Nobody serves up finer vintages and treasures than House Kraken. Shall we? We shall, boomed Leonis. You guys going to get a drink? Soon, said Scorio. Go ahead, I'll be right there. So he kind of goes out into onto the balcony himself and is looking around, and he sees Fang talking to an older lady. And Ravenna Accardi is there, and Ravenna, if I'm not mistaken, is one. Maybe there's one girl that Scorio has described as being pretty enough that he would be sometimes distracted, like kept taking glances at her. But I feel like maybe that was a blonde, and Ravenna has dark hair, so it may not be the same person. Um, but she is the one that went up against Jova, and she was doing really well until Jova leveled up and then had that humiliating defeat. Uh, and she is now wearing House Kraken robes. So seeing her makes him think of Jova, and he is considering what Jova has said, whether or not this stuff is true. And he's starting to wonder himself. He's like, am I the same guy? Like, I was genuinely ready to kill myself to get ahead, and I don't know that I do feel that way anymore. And as he's asking himself this, Ravenna has snuck up behind him, and she's got a couple glasses, and she's just like, is this a bad time? And she is, I am wondering, I'm sort of like, is she going to be sent by Kraken to try and, steal him away? Um, I'm also interested in the fact that Fang is over here talking to somebody. I don't like Fang because of the way he treated Naomi. So my instinct anytime I see him mentioned is to just be like, what's this motherfucker doing now? What is it? What is it? Ugh, this guy, And it may be perfectly innocent. It might be nothing. But it might be something. I don't know. I'm curious about it. So I guess that's it. Yeah, I guess that's it. I can't believe that I managed to cover that within reasonable time. But like I said, you guys, I'm just really fascinated at the overall the psychology of the character. Like, this is always my thing. And it's part of why a lot of stories that have intense, detailed magical systems, or in the case of Song of Ice and Fire, lineages, that stuff doesn't really interest me as much as the creation of a character with a very specific motivation and what that means, especially if somebody is written well and consistently. And Jova, I am really fascinated by because she feels like she is so similar to Scorio in certain ways, but in some of the major drives of his personality, like if Jova, for example, were offered to work with the Iron Tyrant, that sounds like exactly her jam. You know, being pushed to the brink constantly and given extremely strict rules, like that sounds like something she would thrive in. Uh and like half of that still does feel like it applies to Scorio, just not the rules. They're both willing to go to lengths, but they're each willing to push in different directions for it. And I'm just fascinated by the fact that I can understand her in a lot of ways and respect her, but also be disappointed in the fact that she doesn't feel the kind of empathy for the people of Bastion as I want her to. And I like that she can at least acknowledge that she recognizes if she had lived as Scorio had, it would probably be different. So that points to a kind of self-awareness that even if she isn't reacting the way I want, the self-awareness is worth a lot, you know, and that really helps mitigate me being disappointed in her. But nevertheless, I am still a little. So it's she's just so incredibly, she's able to compartmentalize things so completely. And Scorio isn't, and frankly, I don't think compartmentalization is often really a good idea. I think there are times for it, but I don't think it's a great way to go through life because in general, I don't think things are as disconnected as we want to pretend. Most stuff is really, really dependent on other things and luck also. So trying to pretend that's not the case is, I think, sort of trying to fight nature. But maybe she'll feel that way eventually, or I don't know. I don't know. So, but I'm liking this. I'm liking this a lot. So we'll see what happens. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you, Dan, again, very much for hanging out with me in the chat. Dan called her insular. That's a good word for her. Yeah, definitely. Um, all right, everybody. Well, I will see you soon with a new episode. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.